And a third downside in the belief of perfectibility, I think, is a distortion of human relationships, especially parenting. Now, here's a quote from a mother that appeared in the Boston Globe on the parenting experts. She said, "I'm overwhelmed with parenting advice. I'm supposed to do lots of physical activity with my kids so I can instill in them a physical fitness habit so they'll grow up to be healthy adults. And I'm supposed to do all kinds of intellectual play so they'll grow up smart. And there are all kinds of play for finger dexterity, word games for reading success, large motor play, small motor play. I feel like I could devote my life to figuring out what to play with my kids. On top of that, I have to be a short order cook, preparing 2 or 3 meals at a time, because if I force my kids to choose between eating what's there or skipping a meal, they'll get an eating disorder." Well, I think anyone who's recently been a parent and has looked into the child-rearing manuals can sympathize with this frazzled mom. Now, here are some sobering facts about research on parenting. Most studies of parenting are useless. The studies that gave rise to all of this advice for mothers. Why are they useless? Because they don't control for heritability. They measure some behavior in the parents, they measure some trait in the children, they show there's a correlation, and they assume that correlation implies causation. It must have been the parenting behavior that shaped the child in that manner. Much of this research doesn't even test the possibility that parents transmit genes to their children as well as an environment. And so, for example, the fact that parents who talk more to their children have kids with better language skills, or parents who spank their children have children who grow up to be violent, may come because there are genes that predispose children to being more articulate or more violent. There are studies that do control for inheritance, for example, retesting for the correlations in adopted children who do get parenting experience from their parents, but not their genes. And here are the 2 findings that turn up over and over again in study after study. One of them is that siblings separated at birth end up as similar as siblings reared together. Now, remember the Malafert twins. Separated at birth, they bump into each other at the patent office with identical contraptions in their lap. Okay, that's one discovery, but that's not the one that I'm talking about here. A second discovery from that research, which is less well appreciated, but equally important, is that if the Malafert twins had grown up together in the same house with the same parents, they would have been no more similar than they would have been if they had been separated. Similarly, for biological siblings, those who are separated and brought up in different homes are no more different than those brought up in the same home. Corroborating that set of studies are ones that look at similarities among adopted siblings who don't share genes but do share an environment, and find that they're not similar at all in adulthood, in personality or intelligence. They are no more correlated than pairs of people plucked off the street at random. Well, what are the implications? The implications are that the intellect and personalities of children are shaped not by parents, but by a combination of factors, in part, although only in part, by genes, in part by the surrounding culture, both the culture of the society as a whole and the children's own culture, which we call a peer group, and in part by chance events in the wiring of the brain in utero in the first few years of life, and perhaps chance experience. Now, I found that when people hear these results, which were first brought to public attention by Judith Rich Harris in her book, The Nurture Assumption, they often have the following reaction. So you're saying it doesn't matter how I treat my children. Now, it may be a natural reaction at first, but think about it. Of course it matters how you treat your children. It's never okay to abuse or belittle or neglect children, because that's a terrible thing for a big, strong person to do to a small, helpless one who is under that person's care. Child rearing, above all, is a moral responsibility. Also, let's say someone told you that you can't shape the personality of your spouse. Now, no one but a newlywed really believes that you can change the personality of your spouse. Nonetheless, on hearing this bit of wisdom, no one says, oh, so you're saying it doesn't matter how I treat my spouse. Well, of course it matters how you treat your spouse. It matters to the quality of the relationship that you have and the degree of pleasure and respect and depth that your relationship will enjoy. Likewise, parenting is a human relationship between two people, one of whom is a parent, one of whom is a child, and how the parent treated the child in childhood is going to affect the quality of that relationship. And I think it's a sign of the influence of the blank slate that so many people could forget this simple truth, or at least when intellectualizing they can forget it, and think of parenting only as the molding or micromanaging of a child's personality, whereas in fact it's much more than that.